The question really is, how different is it now when applying for a buy-to-let mortgage as to what it was a year ago? How much more difficult is it to achieve that, and is there the same availability for interest only as opposed to interest and capital repayment?
You free for all?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So interest only is easy. Yes, it's an accepted application process for buy-to-let mortgages still, and no different. There is no difference from a year ago. The Prudential Regulation Authority, which I don't know really where they come from, because usually it's the Financial Conduct Authority that interfere with mortgages. However, they exist apparently. They've come up with some new rules about regulating for landlords with 4 or more properties, so 4 let properties, and you are now designated to be portfolio landlords. And the lenders have spent a load of money, had to put a load of rules in place to cope with applications from you going forward. So that doesn't matter whether you're remortgaging one that you've already got or you're buying another one. If you've got 4+, you are a portfolio landlord. And there are different stress tests that they now put in place. So your rent versus your mortgage amount, if you've seen that before, where, yeah, as long as your rent exceeds your mortgage by X, that's doable, yeah. Yours is likely to be a higher stress test. So if Joe Bloggs, who's got one property, needs £400 a month rent to get the deal, you might need £450 on the same property. Okay? There'll be a background check as to whether it's plausible that you can live your life based on your declared income and service these debts. So there'll be a background check. There'll be a loan to value check around your portfolio. One of the major lenders, if your portfolio is over 65% of its value in lending terms, they don't want to know you anymore. Done, finished with you, gone. And then, yeah, they've got some weird and wonderful rules about, connected with what Corinne was saying about your rent is now grossed up onto any other incomes that you have to determine what tax band they think you are in, and then they apply a higher stress test against you because of that. So they take it as if your gross rent is your profit, and I'm sure you'd all be delighted if that was the case. So lots of, they would say it's about responsible lending and restrictions. I would say you've got to embrace it, and if you do embrace it, you'll get the same access you've always had to mortgages, but it might take you some time to get there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? You'll have a chance at the end. Okay, good. Can I have, I did it my way. Can I use my pension to buy a residential property? Who wants to do this one?
No, you can't.
Okay.
No, there's ways in which you can, but you can't own residential property within a pension. Short answer. People often think they can. We often get asked the question, but no, you can't. It's not legally allowed. You're not allowed to do that.
You can't use the money in the pension if you take it out, can't you?
There's the new rules around pension access.
Okay.
So from 55, you can take your entire pension out as a lump sum, which is great. But what isn't written in the press quite often is that you pay that as your highest marginal rate of tax. So it's paid to you as a PAYE payment. So in effect, if you've got anything over £100,000, you're typically going to pay 45% tax on that fund. So what you thought was a £100,000 pension all of a sudden becomes £60,000. It's quite a big hit.
Well, it went in tax-free, so it's got to come out taxed, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
There's no...
Is there not a 25% concession?
Oh, hold on.
Absolutely. Yeah. There is the...
question again, because we want it for the video.
Sure.
Come on.
I was just saying, is there not a 25% concession on that for tax payable?
Or sometimes more for older schemes as well. We've seen 25, 29, 30%. But you're right, yes, there is. In most schemes these days, you're allowed to take a minimum 25% out of it as a tax-free lump sum.
Thank you.
I've got a question for all you guys. Do any of you own any properties with a friend? No?
Yeah,
Yeah? I want you to check out whether they were in joint tenants or tenants in common. Because I want to just share with you a story of two mates. This was a couple of years ago. Decorator and a plumber were buying houses when they came up. They bought them from the big corporate agents, used the solicitors, the factory solicitors, and they just bought them. They ended up buying 10. And one of them popped their clogs. And what happened was, because they were in, I'm not going to tell you which is the right or wrong way, because the professionals will tell you which one, but they had it down as one particular type of freehold. What happened was, is the wife, because it was tenants in no, it was joint tenants, wasn't it? Yeah, I always get that one wrong. Because they were joint tenants, which is basically the type of freehold when you buy a property as a couple, they were all bought as joint tenants, which meant that the property automatically went to his mate, whilst his wife got lumbered with the inheritance tax bill. If you buy with friends, check. Have you come across that? Anyone?
Yeah, it's very common, particularly with the factory solicitors. They just want to churn it out, fixed fees. They'll just rubber stamp it, and away you go. And you think you've got best advice. It's always worth double checking with experts like Taylor and
Just
Emmett.
check.
If you want to as well, you can serve check it, and then you can serve notices to sever
Yeah.
the tenancy.
Okay, let's open it up. Here we go. So you don't know any of these, so just put your hands up if you think it's best, and cut across each other. Cut across each other if you disagree. I rent out a number of properties. The tenant in one of the properties recently passed away, and I don't know what to do in relation to getting the property back and recovering the rent that the tenant owed me. That sounds like the one for you, James.
Just because the tenant's died doesn't automatically mean...
Tell the guys at home.
Because the tenant's died, it doesn't automatically mean that the tenancy has come to an end. The tenancy will pass into the estate of the deceased. The rent will still fall due. The executors of the estate, administrators of the estate, will strictly speaking be liable. I mean, it's going to be a pretty rough landlord, sorry to say, that won't stop the tenancy immediately and try and re-let it. But strictly speaking, the rent still falls due, and it must be paid. What a landlord would probably want to do in the circumstances is mitigate the circumstances by putting it out for rent again, and at the same time the rent will still fall due until the new tenant goes in.
Anyone's got to add anything else to that? Next one. I have a number of let furnished residential properties. I understand that the 10% wear and tear allowance has been abolished. What can I claim instead? Sounds more like yours, this one.
For me, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so that's right. So April 2016, we stopped with the 10% wear and tear allowance. So what you used to be able to do, as you probably already do know, for furnished lettings, you could claim an allowance which was based on 10% of your gross rents less any cost that the tenant usually incurs that the landlord had incurred. So, for example, rates, water rates, things like that. That's now stopped, and instead we've got a new relief, and it's called replacement of domestic items relief. What you now can do is, not when you buy them new, but for when you're replacing things like movable furniture, soft furnishings such as carpets, blinds, linen, cutlery, white goods such as freezers and fridges, you can claim the cost of replacing them. You can still always claim the cost of repairs as well. For tax purposes, we argue that the residential property is the asset in its entirety, and therefore if you just say replacing a kitchen, as long as you're not substantially improving the property, you're just replacing like for like, then we claim that as a repair and allow that against your rental income and claim tax relief.
Perfect.
Okay.
And don't you dare go and do your own houses up and ask the contractor to put the bill under your rental address. Did I just say that? Should I put my rental portfolio in a trust for my kids? Whose is this?
Okay, right, there we go, can't we?
Yeah.
Depends if you want capital, if you want to give the capital away. and lose an element of control in that respect. There's all manner of complications regarding how much you can put in, entry charges, periodic charges, depending on the size of the portfolio, whether it's leveraged or not, and how much can go in. So it's a question that we get asked reasonably often, but it's not an off-the-shelf solution in many cases.
If you have no intention of ever selling it and wanting to pass it on to your children, it's a better solution, is it?
Potentially.
Yeah, it can be, but as Raj said, depends on the value of the portfolio, because when you create the trust, you can crystallise a tax charge at that point. So you do need to consider that as well. But it does take it out of your estate. Everybody has a tax-free nil rate ban currently for inheritance tax of, I think, about 325,000. So if your portfolio is below that, husband and wife, you would have 2 nil rate bans. Then maybe you might want to consider moving it into trust. Depends on the type of trust though, because trusts pay tax at different rates. So you have to consider whether or not it's going to be paying more tax than you would be paying if it was in your name, or if you gave it to your children outright.
Anyone else?
In some respects, you can be quite creative with your trust planning as well, to create debt on your estate and so forth. So it's like a game of chess in that respect, but we can happily advise if needs be.
Okay. I have a tenant from hell and I need possession of my only rented property as soon as possible. I hate them desperately. I can't mention that word. I need to sell it. I want out. What is the quickest way to get possession? Who's this? This sounds like a James question.
The quickest, ultimately, you have to follow.
Sending the boys round? No, you're not allowed to do that anymore.
I can't say
that. Just comes out. I'm sorry.
You have to follow. There are procedures in place that you have to follow. Only the court can grant an order for possession, and even the order for possession doesn't mean that the landlord is entitled to possession of the property. Only a bailiff can remove someone from a property, and only then can a landlord recover possession. It can be a very long process. It sometimes can take months. For example, Sheffield County Court is currently dealing with post from mid-December. They are so far behind. But sometimes you can get a quick hearing. Trespass is a very quick a way to get a route if you've got trespassers in a property. It's also illegal now. But sometimes if it's absolutely imperative that you get possession urgently, it's worthwhile approaching a tenant and making them an offer, cash, to surrender the tenancy and vacate. Always get a written agreement in place that's signed by the parties to, a deed of surrender basically. So they can walk out and put a deposit down for a new place. That's probably the quickest route. You have to fork out some money to do it, but you would likewise fork out legal fees in any event to try and get them out, and with uncertainty about any defence they're going to raise and time as well.
I think it comes down to, using a good agent, making sure that all the checks are in place. Agents have this spider sense whether they're going to be a good tenant or not.
Yeah. Credit checks and so on and so forth. Yeah.
And again, I think agents are a lot more rougher and tougher when it actually comes to trying to screw money, get the rent out of people. I really must stop doing that. It's on camera as well, isn't it? Okay. I sold my home a few years ago, and I've been living at my son's home, helping out with the children, and I'm going up the wall. I have several buy-to-let residential properties and now looking to purchase a house for me to live in. Do I have to pay the additional 3% stamp duty? Sounds one of yours, that one.
That's for me, yeah. Okay, so initially it sounds like possibly yes, because this lady, I'm assuming it's a lady, has already got some other properties, so she will own more than one property at the end of the day. However, there is a relief if you're replacing only your main residence from the additional stamp duty, land tax, which you probably know is an extra 3%, the surcharge. Now, because there's some changes coming in November 2018, but because we're not there yet, then you don't have a 3-year rule. Instead, you can just look back and see if you've sold a main residence previously. So as long as this lady has sold a main residence before, and in the intervening period she's not had another main residence, which is at home, then yes, I think she could buy a new main residence and benefit from the relief, so she doesn't pay the additional 3%.
Good. I think this is a Russell one. What's your best mortgage rate, Governor?
Okay. Yeah, we get this question quite a lot. So the standard answer is I can get you 0% with Leeds Building Society, but you might not pass with them.
What's
and
the
you won't
catch?
like the deal.
What's the catch?
The
I don't think it's free in this world.
It's 0% for the first 6 months, and then it rises over a tie-in of 3-4 years, whatever it is. But buy-to-lets in general, rate-wise, you can get sub 2% depending on loan to value. So if you're putting 40% is about the optimum into something, and that goes against the minimum in, maximum out principle. But if you put 40%, or you've got a 40% differential on a remortgage or review of rate, then you could be sub 2%.
Here's an interesting fact. 64% of buy-to-let properties in the last 10 years have been bought without a mortgage. Sorry? Without a mortgage. I always thought it was more. Ooh, I'll go back in. Back to me safe place.
Yeah. Yeah, no remortgage very quickly.
James, you are rocking and rolling tonight. A tenant recently vacated one of my properties without giving me notice. He has been a problem tenant from the start, and I know where he moved, but he is unwilling to pay me any rent. Can I send the... No, you can't. No. Can I send the boys around? Can a tenant just do this?
Just vacate? Simply vacate? No, they can't.
And pay no rent?
I'd pay no rent. No, they can't simply vacate because, strictly speaking, even tenants must give notice. Generally, it's around a month's notice. They can't do it within the fixed term unless there's a break in there. The rent still falls due, but as before, if the tenant does vacate, then the landlord will probably be expected to mitigate losses by putting it on the market and trying to re-let it, but the rent will still fall due from the tenant. Interestingly, if the tenant does give notice and then fails to vacate, there is a 1737 Distress for Rents Act, which means that a landlord can recover twice the rent until the tenant moves out as a penalty. 1737. I think 1737. As a penalty. So no, they can't basically because they've not broken the contract in essence.
That's it with the email questions. Anyone want to have a go? Remember, we've got Robbie Williams. We've had Robbie Williams already. We've had Frank Sinatra. So, is there any other questions you have? We are going to stop afterwards. So, if you've got any one-to-one questions, that's absolutely fine. Right. The bottom line is if you are a landlord, it is going to get tougher. All right. There's no two ways about it. If you actually look at your the tax you've been paying, you've actually got off over the years quite lightly. It's been very tax advantageous. We've had some decent capital growth as well. And we've made hay while the sun has shined. It's going to get tougher. So you need to be smarter. You need to take advice. You need to take advice from these guys. You need to take advice from the guys at Bricknells. You need to look at your rents. You need to maximise your rents, get the best tenants, and ride out this storm. Because what are your other options when it comes to investment? Bitcoin? Stock market? There's something good about the property market. Bricks and mortar. You can touch it. You know it. You're just going to have to work a lot smarter and a lot harder. Work with the agent. They're not just there to collect the rent. They're there to work with you in your portfolio. They have got to know what you want from your investment. You've got to know what you want from your investment. Is it capital growth? Is it yield? Do you want income in the future? Do you want income now? You might have to forego income now to enable you to get actually what you really need, which is income when you retire. Really just sit down with these guys, get your portfolio out, talk to them, because I always say landlords are more likely to tell you their PIN number than what they've got in their portfolio. Start opening up to these agents, tell them, talk to your agent, and get the advice that you need. Because you don't know all the answers, because what you don't know, you don't know. These guys should know the answers, so it's talk to them. I'd like to thank the panel today. I'd like to thank Chris and Dawn for inviting me here today. And I'd like to thank you for attending, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And let's all give each other a round of applause.